The latest coaching intel out there. So there's a lot of movement, and I first wanted to start with something that happened today. James Franklin has signed a 10-year extension. Jesse, Colin, how old will you be? 2031. James Franklin, at least the piece of paper he signed today, says he will be the Nittany Lions head coach through 2031. It's 10 years. It's about $7 million per. He's got some incentives and whatnot in there. Descending buyout. It's a pretty standard looking contract. What we don't know is all the other promises that he had to have been given behind the scenes. Now, look, I'm going to be full disclosure with you now that this is over. I don't think James Franklin's name was in the pool nearly to the degree you were led to believe at USC. That's just what I think. I got good reason to think that. But that's not to disparage him. Good for James Franklin. What I hope is this is not the last time that we see a coach that may have options stick around. It's not the worst thing in the world. So James Franklin stays at Penn State. Now, here's what I was thinking when I read this news. Is this the only guy with options that's going to stick around? Because you see, right now, you look out there, and we have this wildly volatile coaching market. And what do you automatically think? Well, you automatically think anyone whose name is involved and who has options is just automatically going to be on the move. Why? Well, because I just think they should be on the move. Well, James Franklin didn't move. Who else may stay put? Because it made me think of Dave Aranda. And I wonder, have we put the cart before the horse with Dave Aranda? With all these jobs open, from Southern Cal to LSU to Florida, and Dave Aranda out there at little old Baylor, apologies to Dabo Swinney, little old Baylor out there, who in the world would ever choose Baylor over USC or Florida? I don't know, maybe Dave Aranda would. I can tell you, when we were out there a couple of weeks ago, he didn't bat an eye when he looked us dead in our eyes and talked about how much he loved Baylor. And so all I'm asking, humbly, is with all the assumption that it's going to be not if but when Dave Aranda leaves, and the only question is which job is he going to take, I wonder if there may be an alternative in there, and that alternative could be Dave Aranda says, I appreciate it, I'm good here. And everyone goes, oh man, how could he do that? Well, Matt Campbell's done it at Iowa State. I don't think people quite realize how some of these guys are wired differently, and they don't always view programs the same way the public does. The public looks at Baylor, and they see a rung on the coaching ladder. The public looks at Iowa State, Cincinnati, they see rungs on the coaching ladder. Well, Louisiana could fit that description too. Billy Napier has let some opportunities go by. I don't know what Dave Aranda is going to do. I'm telling you right now, if Pate State had a job opening, I'd go lay down behind the guy's car until he agreed to be my head coach. So absolutely, if I were Florida or LSU or USC, I'd go after him. I think you're foolish if you don't. But I also am not going to assume that he's just ready to leave Baylor. I think it's been kind of irresponsible on my part that I've just assumed, it's going to be one of them. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Look, I got a green Sharpie up here for Dave Aranda. That's kind of that's some imagery I've had on the show that no one's picked up on. But I just made that up. But Dave Aranda may have roots planted a little deeper in Waco, Texas than you've been led to believe. Let me just put it that way. So let's go to Florida. What's the latest with Florida? There's been a lot of Billy Napier smoke down there. I think it is legitimate. I don't particularly think a lot of this has been the best kept secret in the world. But when the Florida job came open, it stood to reason. Billy Napier had in some ways slow played other jobs because he's been waiting for this opportunity. And when I say this opportunity, I'm not speaking about the Florida job specifically or exclusively, although I do think Florida's been on his very short list. And so it's open. Of course Billy Napier wants the job. If you are Florida, if you are Scott Strickland, and this guy checks your boxes, you hire him yesterday. Get it done. Get it done. Now, I think Florida's still doing their due diligence on some other guys whose names maybe you haven't heard, but if Billy Napier checks your boxes, number one, you hire him, and number two, you don't waste a moment asking yourself, why aren't we having to fight LSU for this guy? The reason LSU may or may not want him is totally inconsequential. You said it yourself. If you're Scott Strickland, you said it yourself. What the rest of college football is doing in their coaching searches should not affect the University of Florida. You were right. It was only 48, 72 hours ago. You were right then. You're still right now if you think that way. If Billy Napier is your guy, you go get yourself Billy Napier and you let him start putting together a staff. But I do believe that the same factor is possibly in play with Florida as was in play, or still is theoretically, with LSU. Remember at the outset of the LSU coaching search, I told you it had been relayed to me don't just focus on the names that are being reported. This is an extremely highly thought of job within the industry. There are going to be people reach out in a very clandestine manner. I think that's the first time we've ever used that word. And you're not going to hear about them until they sign a contract. And if they don't, you'll never hear about them. But they're happening. Those conversations are happening behind the scenes. I think there may be some of those conversations happening with the University of Florida. Could be a pro guy, could be a college guy, could be a guy you think is firmly planted wherever he is, and maybe he is. But maybe he's choosing to kick the tires. Maybe he's having his agent choose to kick the tires. This stuff happens. And that's why I wish we could get some ADs write some books on this stuff long after they're finished. So I think you'd be really surprised how much correspondence happens. It never goes anywhere most of the time. But how much kind of just that initial surface-based conversation happens. I think that's going to happen with Florida. I think it is happening. With LSU, I believe the word on the street right now that they are not all that interested in Billy Napier. I believe that. I think the reasons may be a little short-sighted, but I do believe that. I don't think he's out of it for the LSU job, but I think he's down the list a little ways for the LSU job. Again, the reasons don't make a whole lot of sense to me. I don't really care if you coach at Louisiana Lafayette or a high school in Louisiana. If you're the right guy, you're the right guy. But I'm not making the decision down there. Scott Woodward is. However, there's also a lot of Lincoln Riley smoke still with this LSU job, which is why I think this weekend could be very dramatic. Think about this with me now. I'm sure the message boards over in Cajun country have already. But the rest of the country is kind of passively watching this. So let's dive in for a second. Lincoln Riley has not shot this down. He's the head coach at Oklahoma. And LSU has not hired anyone, so they're still out there and they're big game hunting. This Saturday's big because if Oklahoma loses, there is no conference championship to go play for. There is no college football playoff spot left to vie for. And at that point, if it is Lincoln Riley, you'll know. You'll know within 24 or 48 hours, I would imagine. Now, here's what's going to be really juicy. What if Oklahoma loses Saturday and then there is no Lincoln Riley announcement? And that means LSU is probably not landing Lincoln Riley, but they still haven't named anyone, which means all of a sudden, are we waiting for another coach whose season is still going on? Are we waiting for a guy from the NFL whose season is still a month away from concluding? These calendars do not sync up. They never do. This is a mess. The way the early signing day and the transfer portal and coaching searches work, it's a total mess. But it does have to happen this way. Watch Saturday. If OU loses, watch Saturday very, very closely. Sunday, I guess, would be the day to watch closely. Also, Luke Fickell. Speaking of calendars, Luke Fickell's the head coach at Cincinnati right now, and I've been hearing about him for about a year from people close to him who have said his name's always out there. This is kind of like Matt Campbell. He is not a guy who's in a hurry to get out of here. Billy Napier at Louisiana has been the same way. He's not a guy who's in a hurry to get out of here. Like everyone thinks, if you're at Cincinnati, you must just be waiting on the first person to cast their eyes your way, and then you just wave like you're Tom Hanks on the deserted island. Help, help, come get me. That's not how Luke Fickell views his job. They genuinely like being in Cincinnati. They are an Ohio family. They're about to be in a Power 5 conference anyway if you just stay at Cincinnati. And they're happy. That's the best way I can put it. They're happy. And so, yeah, I don't think that, Luke Fickell's going to coach 30 years and retire at Cincinnati, but it may be just like Billy Napier, or it may be like Matt Campbell at Iowa State. It's going to take a perfect situation to draw him away. And I can tell you right now, if that guy goes undefeated and they're in the playoff, he's not entertaining your offer until their season's over. And so at that point, if you want to hire him, you're sitting there waiting until January. Are you going to do that? I mean, if he's your guy, theoretically you should, but you really going to do that? So that's something to keep in mind with a lot of these guys. These calendars, they rarely sync up the way you want them to. And so whether it's Lincoln Riley or whether it's Luke Fickell, if you want to hire him, you need to root against him right now. The sooner their season ends and the sooner that those high stakes are off the table, the quicker, in theory, you'd be able to hire him.